All right, Amy, welcome. Excited to hear from you and a little more about the 410 Bridge and specifically what God's doing in Guatemala. So take it away.
Great. Well, first of all, just thank you for inviting me into your classroom. I'm not typically the speaker, so this could be a little bit bumpy along the way. I do have an outline, so hopefully I can stay on target based on what Paul wanted me to kind of talk to you guys about. And I'm going to try to keep a watch of the time too. So I found myself, when I talk about my work at 410 Bridge, that I easily just get so involved and like into the details of what I do, because I'm just like excited, honestly, about what we do, and could talk about it for hours, but I promise I will, I'll keep this within the time limits that Paul has given me. First of all, and it's great to hear that I guess a group of you are going on a trip with us, but it's to Kenya, not to Guatemala. I'm sad about that, but no, I love Kenya. And actually I've just recently found out that I'm going to be working more closely with Kenya in the coming months. But currently right now I work with Guatemala and Haiti. So anyway, I'm just going to back up a little bit and tell you a little bit about our organization and kind of our model. First of all, we're a faith-based ministry, and we're involved in community development. And what we want to do is to go in to one community at a time, or several communities at a time, and kind of go deep and tackle a lot of issues and challenges that are going on in those communities, and then quite honestly get out. And you'll hear more about that kind of get out strategy a little bit later. But our overall goal is to empower people, to walk along beside them through community development, but along that journey, give them this sense of empowerment that they can do this on their own eventually. We're going to be a partner with them as we walk through the development journey with them. But in reality, they're gonna discover skills and resources that they may not have even known that they had in their community. And we're going to help them discover that and learn how to use that and empower themselves as a community to kind of continue their journey after we leave. If you listen to our founder, or if you were to go to our website right now, you would see one of the first things that you would see is we're trying to redefine the war on poverty. And that's a really big statement. But it really is an overall vision of our founder, Candler. We want to help the rest of the world recognize that the poor and the poor in extreme poverty situations are, can you guys hear me? I'm getting a message that my internet's unstable or unstable.
Yeah, you're good. We can hear you.
Okay. Sorry about that. But we're trying to help the rest of the world recognize that the poor, especially in extreme poverty situations, are not a problem to be solved, that they in fact are their own solution. And it just needs, we need a little bit of work with them. Like I said, changing their mindset and even changing our mindset on how we help them so that it can be done in a healthy and sustainable way. With an empowered mindset, you can, you have hope, which there's a lot of despair and lack of hope in the developing world and extreme poverty. But with this empowered mindset that I'll keep referring to, is we're encouraging them and we're giving them hope that there are opportunities for a better life for them and their families. Our biggest accomplishment when we leave one of our communities is to leave them with that empowered kind of mindset. We'll leave them with a lot of other things that have been implemented and executed in the community. But the one thing, in my personal opinion, the most critical thing that we do need to leave them with is that empowerment feeling that they can do this on their own. And the other key thing that we're trying to do is we're trying to put the local church as the center of a community. We want the local church to be the hero. We don't want, you know, the Western world to be considered the hero that's going to come in and save their community. We want them to understand that the church is a resource for help, for in all kinds of help, physical needs, spiritual needs, emotional needs. And so a lot of our, not a lot, all of our projects and programs are implemented around this, this base of spiritual development, and churches are involved in the work that we're doing in the community. So that's kind of this overall big kind of vision that we have. From a tactical perspective, it's basically holistic community development. We work in 5 areas: water, education, economic development, health and wellness, and spiritual development. Spiritual, I always kind of have a caveat around the spiritual development. When you explain it the way that I just did, it makes it sound like it's this kind of standalone thing, when in reality, it's the foundation of all of our programs. So, and what I mean by that is when we implement something like a business startup training for under the economic development area, it's built on biblical principles. It's very faith-based, and quite honestly, we see more people come to Jesus in these trainings than they would in just, you know, some type of church gathering. We're trying to basically meet people where they are in a vulnerable situation and help them from a physical perspective, but it's all biblically based principles. We always refer back to scripture and talk about how it all relates back to God's, you know, God's plan for us here. So I think I mentioned before, our desire is not to like cover an entire country and do, you know, like a water project, you know, every so many you know, counties or departments across the whole country. Our goal is to pick a few communities that actually pick us to come in and help them, and to really go deep. And when I say go deep, to build relationships where we gain credibility, they trust us, we trust them, and that's really, you know, that's really where the special things really start to happen, and the life transformation really starts to happen. Our ultimate goal is to work ourselves out of a job. We have a term that we use now to graduate a community. And that means, you know, when we graduate high school, you can graduate as a straight A student or a C student. So we do have that in some of our communities that we've graduated. We've had some you know, really straight A star communities that we've graduated. And then we've had maybe some C student type communities that we graduated. And, you know, you may be asking, well, why would you leave a C type community? We really do feel like that if we stay too long, we're going to create a dependency that is really unhealthy, and that will really not leave that community the way that we want to leave that community. So I'll show you kind of a development plan in a few minutes, and you'll see that we kind of, when we're talking to church partners, we kind of throw out that 10-year kind of mark is when we're ready to kind of start moving away from a community. But it can, for various things, sometimes it could be sooner. There are instances where we've been in a community, you know, 12 or 13 years because of certain situations and things like that. But our goal is to leave that community, not be there, you know, 15 years from when we first walked into that area. It doesn't mean when they graduate that all their problems have been solved and they're living in this utopia. That doesn't mean that at all. What it does mean is that we have kind of set them on a trajectory. We've got them to a point in time where they have enough confidence. They've seen things work. They're encouraged. They're hopeful. And they feel confident that they can take the next step. There's always going to be more to do in a community, in the communities that we work in. But like I said, the journey we want to take with them is just to get them started and to kind of get them to a takeoff point so that they can keep, you know, keep moving forward without us. And that, you know, frees us up to go to the next community. And that's really kind of this long-term plan of, like, you may have heard the term move the needle. We used to use that around here a lot more than we do now, but to really move the needle across the whole country is, you know, a community or a few communities at a time. That's kind of our philosophy. Yeah, so that's kind of our overall model. A couple of things as we're kind of taking this journey with a community in the countries that we work with. I think I mentioned before that we want to be invited into a community. We want the community to approach us and say, hey, we see what you did in the neighboring community next door. We see how their kids are going to school, how they're making, you know, their income levels are increasing, how they have safe water. We want that for our community. So 410, will you now come over here? Versus us, you know, just, you know, picking a community out on a map. It's like, oh, we haven't worked over here in this region yet, let's go here. That the idea is that, that we want to be invited. If we're not invited, then we don't feel like that the community is going to be as invested in the community development journey, versus us just coming in and trying to sell ourselves to them. So that's kind of important to us. When we do go into community, we work through elected community leaders. These are not necessarily related to any kind of government elected positions. These are specifically elected for 410 community development work. We call that group a leadership council. So as I mentioned that term, moving forward, you'll know what I mean by that. A leadership council in a community could be anywhere from 12 to 15 people. It's designed to represent the whole demographic of the community. There's men on the council, there's women, there's pastors, there's young adults, older adults from the community, educators, teachers, business people, farmers. We want the demographics of the entire community represented on that council moving forward. Are we doing okay?
Yeah, we are. I'm just going to move our picture of us it keeps coming right into your face. So I'm moving us over to the other side. So we're not overlapping on your eyeball.
Okay. So let's see, where was that? So that's kind of like our ideal leadership council, is representatives from all parts of the community. The leadership council is the one that ultimately defines the vision for that community. We take them through this exercise, and I won't go into the details of it, But we take them through this exercise of kind of drawing this map of their community and identifying the challenges in their community, identifying resources in their community, and identifying, ultimately bringing them to a place where they have this vision. We ask them, what do you want your community to look like 5 years from now? What do you want it to look like and be like 10 years from now? And so we kind of take them through that exercise, and ultimately, our goal is that this is their community. It's not ours. We're going to leave. Like I said, at some point in time, they're going to be there. Their future generations are going to be there. So what do you want that life to look like for your kids and your grandkids and future generations? And so we really lean in to that leadership council. And I'll make a note. This is probably one of the biggest keys to our success, is the leaders in that community. Because if I look back over all the communities that I work with in the countries that I work with right now, and I had to pick out the star communities versus the kind of average or C communities, it's all driven by the leaders in that community. So these first steps that we do with a community, we really don't like to rush through them. We really need to be thorough. We really need to make sure that we're on the same page, and they're on with us, and they're on this, we're all on the same page, because it's key. And if that gets rushed or things get overlooked in those first, that first year or first couple of years, you're going to have problems later on. You're going to have problems that ultimately you may not be able to solve, or you're going to have to start over. So, so these are key points in the process, and that's picking the leaders and working with the leader. And I say picking, we don't pick them, but explaining to the community what these elected leaders are going to be doing and how important they are. The other point that I want to make, and this is where the rope comes in, Paul, is we really believe in a pull versus push kind of model. And what I mean by that is we want to help them build that vision for their community and walk through ideas and ways to achieve things to get them to that vision. But ultimately, we want them to pull us. We don't want to be pushing them. And so if somebody can take that rope right there at that front table and just kind of stretch it out, if you want to double it up, it might be too long to use. Well, we kind of need to put it across the whole table.
We'll bring it all the way to the back here.
No. Just let's put it across this first table.
Okay.
I need it to kind of be flat.
You can just hold it.
Okay, so maybe squish up the one side of it. Can you roll it up to where it's like a shorter? Maybe do it again. Double it again.
Here it comes.
Okay, so pull that tight.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, so is it all the way to the one end of the table?
No.
Okay, that's fine. Okay, so if you were to go, I may be pointing the wrong way because the way they were. If we wanted to get that rope from that side of the table to the other side of the table, try pushing. Don't do anything with the front part of the rope, but try pushing from the back. All right. Well, it didn't work as quite as like I had planned, but you see how it didn't. You see how it kind of crunched up and it didn't really move very efficiently. Okay, stretch it out again. Sorry. Put it in position again. Okay, now pull it. Okay, you see how much cleaner that is and how much smoother?
Awesome.
Oh,
So that's just kind of this like visual thing that you can hold on to. If you learn nothing else about the presentation, you know, the push a rope versus the pull rope kind of demonstration. But the basic idea is we don't want to be seen as coming into somebody's community where we don't live. We spend overall very little time there. We didn't grow up in that culture. So why should we come in and tell them how to solve their problems? Or better yet, what they need. And that's a trap that U.S. trip participants, when we send people on teams to our countries, that's a real easy trap. I even find myself falling into the trap sometimes. I will see a problem in a community and I will immediately think to myself, well, that doesn't need to be that way. Just do this or do this or do this, and then your problem solved. Well, that's all based on my experience, on the culture that I grew up in, on the family that I grew up in, on my background, on my education experience. I mean, that's all built on where I'm coming from. And in reality, that's very different from where people are in our communities in extreme poverty. And so we have to be really careful that they are very involved and very invested into what the solutions to their challenges and their problems are. And it's not just us telling them how to solve those problems, because we will go back in a year, we will go back in 3 years, and the problem will still exist because they weren't educated enough potentially to, you know, to do things that I think that needed to be done. They were not emotionally invested into the solution of the problem themselves. And so the minute things go wrong, they kind of throw their hands up. And there's just many different reasons as to why that particular approach can fail. So you have to be really careful when you're working in the developing world in these communities, because we come from a very, very different world than they are. And the approach sometimes may work, the US, the American approach, the Western approach, but more times than not, it's not going to. All right. This is where I'm going to try to share my screen. We put this document together probably maybe 2 years ago, if that long ago, because we felt like we needed to document to our church partners that we work with on, like, because they come along in this journey with us, and I'll kind of explain that part of it in just a minute. But you know, they have a lot of questions of like, well, you know, how long is this going to take? And what do we do in year 1? And what's going on? We've been in this community year 5, you know, where should we be? That kind of stuff. So we kind of put this document together to kind of explain, not that this is exact. These are just some guidelines, but I think it's a good picture. Let me see. I'm going to try to find, here we go. Can you guys see that?
yeah.
Yep.
Okay. So when we go into a community, we don't know exactly what the plan is there, because it's very specific to what they want to do and what their vision is. But these are just some kind of like phases where we see certain things happening. In phase 1, 0 to 6 months. Now that's not exact. It probably turns into maybe the first year is this launch phase. And I'll go through the details of that later. And then, but this kind of is that area that's really, really important that I mentioned earlier of choosing the leadership council and getting them set on the right, on the right page and on the right trajectory as to what they're going to be doing as leaders in their community. Then we move into the foundational phase, phase 2. And this is anywhere from a year to 3 years, maybe. And we're doing a lot of smaller type stuff to kind of gain momentum and stuff. Then we move into phase 3, and we're really implementing some core programs in the community at this point. And a lot of trainings going on with people. And I'll share some details with that about you in a minute, or about that with you in a minute. And then, really the last, 5 years or so, 4 to 5, 6 years maybe, is this plan to continue growing the leaders in the community. But everything we implement, we want to look at 2 things. How much is the community contributing? A big part of our model is if we do a project and say it costs $10,000 to do the project, we expect the community to contribute to part of that. We're not just going to raise money over here and finance the whole project, even if it's just a very, very small amount. And a lot of times in the beginning, this turns into like labor. The community will work on a project and they'll provide the labor. So we won't pay people for the labor on a project or something like that. A lot of times it'll be a really small amount of money that they'll provide. So it could be as small as $200 for a $10,000 project. The bigger thing is the principle that we're trying to instill in them, in that you've got to have some skin in the game here. And so during this sustainability period, we're trying to grow that. Like if a community is on the right path, they really should be contributing more to their projects. In some instances, we've seen they've done whole projects without us. And that's the goal. So that by the time we get to year 10 or whatever year that is, when we're ready to graduate them, they have confidence in themselves and we have confidence in that we've done the right thing there. Now these next few slides, it's going to be a lot of words and I don't know how well you can see this, but just a little bit more detail. In the launch phase, that's that invitation. We go in and we have some meetings with them. We talk to them. They ask us questions. We ask them questions to figure out if this is going to be a fit. That also includes electing this first leadership council. And we also explain to them that we want them to kind of tackle a really small problem, like very small problem. But we want to take them through this kind of problem solving process on this really small problem that they're going to tackle on their own. And this is real important for the leaders to start to gain that confidence of, you're right, this may be a small problem, but we can do this. And in the end, even if it's a small problem, it's impacting some amount of people in a good way, or the community in a good way. And the community sees that we can do this, that the leaders are going to be, leaders showing the rest of the community that, hey, we can do things for ourselves. Some of those small problems could be a small portion of road in the community has deteriorated, go fix it, and they figure out how to do that. So that's kind of some of the things that happen in that launch phase. The foundation phase, the next 3 years, we're getting a little bit more refined in our leadership council training. giving them more tools on how to lead their community, and how to set the priorities. They've created this vision, so now they got to get it down to this tactical plan. And what are the priorities? What do we want? What do we need to work on first, second, third, and get to get to that end goal of our ultimate vision. And then a plan of action. Some of this could include starting some small projects. A lot of larger projects, such as healthcare projects, water projects, things like that, are multi-year kind of efforts. So you're beginning to start the plan for those. Probably 95% of the time when I work with our communities, the number one priority usually is safe water. They want safe water. That just opens them up to so many more opportunities. And but that's a big project. I mean, that some of our water projects can run as much as $100. Obviously, we don't have that much money raised in the beginning. That's a multi-year kind of effort, but they're starting to plan for that. Also, we're getting one of our programs that we kind of decided is a really good opportunity for them to start as early as possible is savings groups, teaching them how to save. In a lot of cultures, that's just not part of their vocabulary. They don't understand it. They think, I barely have enough money to survive day to day. How can you expect me to save? But they can. And we work with Hope International in their savings group ministry, and have learned a lot from them. And that's just one of those kind of programs we want to get started early, because the longer that's going on in a community, when we leave, it's a very robust program, and they're in a much better financial situation. Also, we're trying to build unity. A lot of things in the community are, when we go in, are very competitive. Churches even are competitive with each other. We're trying to make them understand that their community, that each person in the community can flourish so much quicker and better if they're working together versus at odds with each other. This is also a time when we launch a child sponsorship program. Our child sponsorship program funds most of our education work in the community. So we enroll students in this program and get US American sponsors. And this is also when we start sending teams. The one thing I'll say about sending teams, we love it. The communities love for teams to come over. Our communities are very humbled that somebody would use their own money for a week, come and help them and work in their community, do Bible studies with them, encourage them, pray over them. The communities are very humbled by that and very encouraged. And that's probably one of the favorite things that they like, especially the deeper that relationships get with people that come over for a number of trips. But I will mention, this is probably our biggest risk point too. Our staff is in our communities every day, kind of preaching to them. What can you do for yourself? What can you do for your community? Don't just wait for somebody to come and do something for you. And then a team gets on the ground and they could just send very, very different messages. They could even give out money behind our back. They could offer to send money later or whatever. So, and that would just undermine a lot of what we're trying to do. If you remember what I said in the very beginning, one of the biggest things that we can do for our communities when we leave is to leave them with this empowered, just kind of empowered feeling that I can take care of myself. I have dignity about myself, which just gives me this freedom to live just a much more productive, God-centered life. And a team can really undermine that. So we do a lot of training with teams. And Paul can give you a lot of details on that because he led a lot of teams. And then phase 3, our progress years, this is where we're, we're just kind of going deeper in the priorities that we're working on. We developed a very detailed, measurable set of outcomes that if we meet these outcomes, we feel like we're ready, this community's ready for us to move on. And so this is that period where we're really starting to measure what we're doing in the community, the programs that we're executing, and how those outcomes are being affected. Also, we ask that the leadership council members only serve for 2-year election cycles. And so, they'll be electing a new set of leaders during that time. And then this last phase, this sustained phase, is, I talked a little bit more about this earlier, this is where we're really trying to look at everything that we're doing. And is it sustainable? Is this project sustainable? If 410 is not here next year, will this still be a successful program or a successful project? We're really evaluating that at this point in time. And we're starting to see a lot of our outcomes are starting to be met. Like by this time, we've hopefully implemented a safe water project. We've implemented economic development programs. We're starting to see people's incomes go up. We're seeing more and more kids in school and doing well in school. And then ultimately, we want to graduate with a big, huge celebration and leave as their friends. Okay, that was a lot. Real quickly, engagement on this side of the bridge. We partner with the U.S. Church. And so we find churches that are interested in engaging in the kind of work that we do. And they pick a country and they pick a community. And then we kind of pair them up. Sometimes most times they'll take like a vision trip and they'll visit several communities and they'll kind of see what community kind of fits with their church. They pick a trip and we pair them up with that community and we start that whole development journey. And the U.S. Church is a big part of that journey. It's not, they're not just funding programs and sending money, but they're sending teams, they're sponsoring children. They are helping us fund projects and programs. They're praying constantly over our communities. Excuse me. And the communities are praying for them. And more, more important than anything sometimes is they celebrate with the communities for their successes. We'll, have teams on the ground for big celebrations when a water project is being commissioned or something like that. And obviously for graduation, the U.S. Church teams are invited over to celebrate in that achievement and stuff. So the way that we engage our U.S. Church partners is just really ask them to go deep in relationship with the community in a healthy way, and kind of within our guidelines. Fortunately, I have to give Paul kudos. From his time at his church, they were one of our really rock star church partners because they involved in all these areas and really did go deep. in their community partnership. Okay, I'm talking a lot. Sorry, guys. Guatemala. Let's talk a little bit about Guatemala. Guatemala is our newest country. I am fortunate to get to work with our group, our staff over there. We started there in 2017 with just 3 communities. Right now we're up to 9. Unfortunately, COVID really hit us hard in Guatemala. I feel like we've really lost like 2 years. Out of all of our countries, Guatemala was probably the most restricted and the most locked down. And even as of, several months ago, we were still dealing with restrictions over there. So COVID really has kind of been a setback for our progress there. Our original 3 communities that we went into there, I would say that they're very much into phase 2. That building a foundation. We're seeing a lot of good things out of those 3 communities. The remaining communities are unfortunately still, I would put them in that phase 1 launch, just because COVID just interrupted some of our momentum and we kind of had to start over. We have a very small staff in Guatemala, 4 people. They're rock stars. They work so hard. Looking forward to 2022. In my mind, this is a huge year for us to mature as an organization there and to advance our programming. I didn't want to use the term growth, because growth would imply that we would add more communities. I don't see us adding many more communities during this year, but really dig into the communities we're in and get that foundation going and start implementing some of our core programs. Man, one of the topics that Paul wanted me to address is what the people of God are doing in Guatemala. And I'm not sure exactly how to answer that, other than to just say he is there. He is definitely involved in our work there. And the only way I can explain that to you is just sharing some stories with you. And this is why I just get really excited about my job. We have a special needs sponsorship program there. One thing that we discovered is that there was a surprisingly big number of kids being born with disabilities and special needs, and were really hidden from the big part of the community because of the kids' needs. The families really become isolated because they don't get out and about in the community that much. So we went in, and there happens to be a rehab center very near our communities in the Western Highlands. And so we went in and we started this sponsorship program to get these kids into this rehab center. And it's phenomenal. My first visit in 2019, I went and I gathered all the information to enroll these kids into our sponsorship program. So I visited each one of them and their families, just heartbreaking situations, seeing these kids in the conditions that they were living in. And I met, the very first child I met was a little kid named Alex. He became so agitated and so upset when I walked in, because he was not used to seeing anybody else that was not his parents. He was just frightened. He could not even sit up by himself. He has physical disabilities and he has some mental disabilities. I mean, he was so agitated to the point where we could hardly get a picture for our website for him. I saw a video of him probably 6 months ago. His family lost their house, or their house became very damaged in one of the floodings recently there, or within the last year, or a small earthquake. And the father lost a job. And so we implemented a special needs campaign to, the community wanted to rebuild their housing. And so we implemented like a special needs campaign to raise money to do that. And we were sharing Alex's story. And Alex has been going to the rehab center for over a year now. And I saw a video of him walking by himself, holding on to bars. But this child was unbelievably like a smile on his face in the middle of a room with all these other people, you know, interacting as best he could. And I just couldn't believe it was the same child. And it's all because of that sponsorship program and getting him into that rehab center. In the meantime, we have rebuilt that house. It's beautiful. In fact, I saw the pictures and I asked Carlos, the community coordinator, I'm like, Carlos, is the rest of the community going to be jealous? Like, this is a really nice house. And Carlos was like, Amy, they are thrilled. They are so thrilled with this, with what this family now has. And it just warmed my heart, because that attitude was not there probably 2 years ago. So that's just a really big story of where God just shows up and he works miracles. Felix, our country director there, he's Spanish speaking. Every time I talk to him, I have to have a translator. Big teddy bear guy. He's a musician, a comedian. He's like this man of all trades. He's basically a coffee guy. He had the opportunity to leave our organization about 8 months ago for a very lucrative position in this coffee co-op that he works for also, but he didn't leave. He stayed. He said, Amy, 410 has done so much for my spiritual journey and my family's spiritual journey that I can't leave. I can't leave the work that I'm doing, and in the way that I'm involved in what we're doing with people. He actually is like seen as like a counselor type of a resource for our communities now. They call him on the weekends when they're having family problems and all this kind of stuff. But you know, just hearing his individual story is, you know, that's God. God just shows up and he works in people's heart. The other thing that I see happening, and I'm running out of time, a lot of time, is when we went into Guatemala, we noticed there's this really interesting dynamic kind of divide between the Catholic Church and the evangelical churches there. Guatemala has a huge Catholic presence there. I'm not Catholic. I don't have a lot of, I don't have experience around a lot of people that are Catholic. Some of my friends are Catholic. So I just know what I see, you know, through their experiences. But, you know, the Catholic Church is much more formal and has their, you know, just their way that they do things. And the evangelical church is quite different in some of those ways. And we see that divide when we first go into a community there, much more so than even in our other countries, where we have those different denominations. But in Guatemala, it just seems like they just like, you do your thing, I do my thing, we don't need to talk kind of thing. And in our 3 oldest communities, they're coming together. They're working together. Leaders from both of those denominations are in the same room, meeting, talking about problems, talking about challenges, talking about issues. And that's a breakthrough. That's a breakthrough in so many ways. And it wasn't like that when we first stepped foot into those communities. And so, you know, that God's there, God's involved, and you know, I just feel like he has a lot planned for what you know, what he wants us to do in Guatemala, and just really excited about it. The the last part that Paul mentioned is my journey, which is, I don't know, if we're kind of running out of time, it's a little bit boring, but I'll just say this. I won't go into that much of my background, but I found 410 Bridge kind of coming out of retirement of raising my 3 kids. I had 3 kids really quickly together and needed to stay home and raise them, and got them to a certain age where I had a little bit of free time, and I found 410 doing a part-time accounting job, and started in accounting, then moved to trips, planning trips. Then I took over the child sponsorship manager, and then I moved into this program manager role. I never thought I would be here 11 and a half years, and I am. In fact, I know I'm the most tenured person on staff other than the founder at this point. But it's crazy for me to think about that, because I was a computer information systems graduate from Clemson University. I went back and got my MBA. I was in corporate world consulting, worked for the Home Depot before I retired to take care of my kids. And now to see that Amy versus this Amy, it's crazy for me to think about. I don't have any formal education in ministry. I don't have any formal education in community development, but I am in the thick of it. I am totally in the thick of it. I know more than I ever thought I wanted to know about safe water projects, about business startup training, about farming, coffee farming training. But I think what happened is I got involved at 410. I learned more about the countries we worked in. I learned more about our model, and this passion and calling just started to flourish. And I would be lying if I didn't say that there's been some points in my journey here that I thought maybe it's time to walk away and to do something else, but I just couldn't. And so yeah, that's my story. I do want to be honest in the work that we do. It's not as glamorous as it looks on the outside. I'm not traveling around on a plane to our country, singing and dancing, holding babies all the time. In fact, I get to do that, but it's probably 10% and 90% of a lot of more boring kind of task. It's messy. People are messy when you work with them, especially from different cultures. It's heartbreaking seeing Haiti go through an earthquake, seeing the kidnapping, seeing the unrest. It's heartbreaking to me to know that my friends over there are suffering. It's disappointing when something is not successful, a project, which there is going to be unsuccessful projects. Other cultures in the developing world are very different from where I am. I'm quite honestly, I become guilt-ridden sometimes as to why I was born in my situation and someone else was born in their situation. So it's hard. It's not for the faint of heart, I would say that. But I think what keeps me going is that I get to see these successful stories. I get to see these heart transformation stories. I get to see people come into Jesus that were potentially considering suicide, weeks before. I get to hear that. I get to see that and experience that. And, it keeps me around.
That's awesome, Amy. Thank you so much. Yeah, let's just thank Amy for her time. I'm so glad we've been able to be a part of that journey for 11 years together. Yes. So that's been great. So thank you, Amy. I'm going to wrap up with these guys, but thank you so much. I'll follow up with you again soon.
Okay.
Thanks. All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.